Module 1.2, Models of Program Planning and Evaluation. In Module 1.2, I want us to look at the various models for program planning and evaluation. Your textbook and myself, and for the entire course, we're really going to focus on the precede-proceed model, but in this particular module, I want us to talk about the other types of models that do exist. And the reason we're focusing on one model of planning, which is precede-proceed, is that I want you to get a good grasp of one model really well versus introducing to you and having you choose a variety of different models, and you're not able to master the concepts of that model well enough. So we're going to really focus on the precede-proceed model, which is a classic model. The textbook itself, the authors were the main developers of this model. So we're going to focus on precede-proceed for the rest of the semester. However, for this particular lecture, I want to introduce you and have you realize that other models for planning and evaluation do exist out there, but we're really just going to focus on one. So we're going to look at theoretical models in general. We're going to look at logic models, and then I'm going to show you examples of some of the models that are out there. And these aren't mentioned in your book because, like I said, this book that you have really focuses on the precede-proceed, but there's models out there such as MAP-IT, MAP, Mobilization for Action Through Planning and Partnership. There's MATCH, there's the CDC and Synergy, and there's a lot more. I'm just showing you some of them. So realize that when we talk about theoretical models, we're talking about models based on theory. And in health, we're looking at health behavior theories. All of these you should know because you've taken in other graduate classes already. But again, we're looking at theories such as the theory of reasoned action, theory of planned behavior, the trans-theoretical model, also called the stages of change model. We're looking at social cognitive theory, protection motivation, diffusion innovations. These are all theories. So when you talk about theoretical model, they're models based on these theories. And you could use these theories alone or in combination with each other. You could pull out constructs from, say, theory of reasoned action and use them with social cog theory. And in fact, out in the field, a lot of people do choose multiple theories and combine them together. You also have what's called a logic model or logic models. These are defined as models that describe the sequence of events for bringing about change. And of course, as we talked earlier in Module 1.1, these changes include things such as knowledge, attitudes, and practice. So a logic model is a picture of how you think things will work. Again, it's the logic behind your thinking. A typical logic model includes an input, what are you putting in, the output, what's the product or the deliverables, and then the outcomes or the impacts of all of these things that you put in. And again, to get a better idea of what logic models are, you could just go online and find a lot of information. There's a lot of resources out there. And again, logic models are just one example that you can have. And again, a logic model is just a picture of what you're thinking or what you think or how you think things are going to work in terms of what you put in, what you get out of it, as well as the outcomes and the impacts. So now let's actually look at some planning models. Again, we're going to look at precede-proceed for a majority of our class, but there's others out there. And you'll quickly realize that no matter which model you use, they kind of follow the same block of information. So these are actually repeated. But there are different ones just because they are developed by different users for different purposes. They are just kind of expansions of each other. Again, there are tools for you, and you just choose the tools that are best for you in terms of planning models. In our class, we're just going to choose precede-proceed as our tool. So MAP-IT, the MAP-IT framework, it's used to assess healthy people to enhance community. So again, it was really developed for healthy people, like Healthy People 2000, 2010, 2020. And it really was used to enhance community health. And it first starts off, again, you see these 5 arrows. It first starts off the arrow on the left-hand side with mobilize, right? So mobilizing the community, mobilizing resources, but it starts off with mobilize. The second arrow is to assess. And again, we're talking about assessing needs, assessing assets, assessing resources. So really to assess. So we go from mobilize to assess. The next step or the next arrow is to plan. So plan for a change, plan for the health program. The fourth step, or the fourth arrow, is to implement. Now run it. Whatever you had planned earlier in step 3, in step 4, you now just run the program, right? So we start off with mobilize, assess, plan, implement, and then the very last arrow, or the fifth step, is to track, or another word, of course, is to evaluate, which is part of pre-seed, proceed as well. So mobilize, assess, plan, implement, and then track. So this was the MAP-IT framework that was used for healthy people. Again, it's a very similar model to the next one that we're going to look at. This one is called Mobilizing for Action Through Planning and Partnership, or what's called MAP, M-A-P-P. So this one kind of has this, you see the cyclical pattern, and you see the arrows, the two-sided arrows going both sides, but it really starts off with identifying community themes and strengths. Okay, so it's assessment of community themes and strengths. And then we're moving in a clockwise manner. The second step is a local public health system assessment, so assessing the public health system. The next step is community health assessment, assessing community health with where they are in terms of their health status. And then the last one, again going clockwise, is forces of change assessment. So what's available out there in terms of policy? Who can actually create change? So it's kind of like a big figure of how to assessing the community themes and strengths, assessing local public health infrastructure, assessing community health status, assessing forces of change. And so hopefully all of this in combination will allow you to really understand the community. And then in the middle you see here, it starts off with visioning, then it moves on to the 4 MAP assessments, those 4 things we talked about in the clockwise manner, then identifying strategies, which basically is planning and then formulating goals and strategies, and then you go on to what we talked about is plan, implement, evaluate, right? So again, another planning model, but the same idea as all the other models we're going to talk about is planning, implementing, evaluating. And then here's another model. I know this one's a little small, so I'm going to try to give you a larger figure. I'll probably put it on Moodle. And this is MATCH. It's the multi-level approach to community health. Again, you start off with, in this one you see phase 1 at the top right-hand corner, in which you have goal selection. So this one says to identify your goals, what you want to achieve. Think about the objectives that you want to achieve in phase 1. Then you move on to phase 2, which is the intervention planning. So planning for what you want to do. You move to phase 3, which is developing the strategies and all of the things you need to achieve your goals. And then phase 4 is implementation. Phase 5 is evaluation. Very similar to all the other models we talked about. You're going to see in the little boxes are just specific things, right? And those are the things we're going to eventually learn throughout the semester as well. But MATCH follows the same similar patterns. Phase 1, goal selection. 2, planning. 3, development. 4, implementation. And phase 5 at the very bottom is evaluation. Here's another one, another model. This was developed, of course, by the CDC, hence it's called CDC Synergy, and it's used to develop and plan health communication programs. So kind of like health campaigns, broad campaigns. You might see, for example, Kaiser does Thrive. A couple years ago, we had, I'm pretty sure it's still around, 5 a day for better health, for example. Michelle Obama's Let's Move campaign. These are all health communication campaigns. And these were developed, if you can see here the picture on the right, it's broken up into 6 phases, and every phase kind of builds on top of each other. So you start off with phase 1, program definition and description. Phase 2, problem analysis. So what really is the problem? Yeah, the first one we did defining the problem, describing the problem. 2, we really dig down and analyze what the problem is. Phase 3 is communication program planning. So planning, what are we going to do? How are we going to develop media outlets? How are we going to develop brochures? Who is our target audience? Phase 4 involves program planning and evaluation. Phase 5 involves program implementation and management. And then phase 6 is feedback. And again, all of this happens in a feedback loop. This is another possible planning model that you can use. This was developed by CDC, and in fact, there are software you can download. I am not sure if it's a fee or if it's free. It used to be free because I used to have it, but I don't know currently if it is, you have to purchase it. But again, you can download. And that program just walks you through all of these different steps. It kind of gives you reminders, and it's actually a pretty neat program. Here is a generalized planning model. So we talked about different types of models. And I already told you that all of these models pretty much are following the same types of patterns. They're labeled differently. They're diagrammed differently. So you can see everything looks very different. But the meat and the bare bones of it is pretty much the same. So and hence, I want to show this generalized planning model in which you see, and we're really focusing on the circles, or the ovals in fact, in which you first assess needs, you set goals and objectives, you develop and you plan for the intervention or the program, and then you implement, you actually put it into action, you run it, and you end up with evaluation. So whether it is the models I've just talked about, or this generalized model, or the model I will talk about, which is precede, proceed, it really much follows all of the same types of patterns.